Hi, my name is Kirk Reagan, and I'm from High Flight Financial. And I'm here to ask the age-old question of renting versus buying. So are you about to PCS? Are you about to move to a new location? And you're probably only going to be there for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And you're deciding, does it make sense to rent or does it make sense to buy? So that's what we're going to dive into today. First of all, I'd like to look at the pros and cons of renting. So obviously it's easy to move. There's limited move-in costs when you go to rent. There's no upfront costs for buyers' costs. The maintenance costs are on the landlord. So if your air conditioner breaks, you call up the landlord and he takes care of it. There's no large down payment. So when you arrive at a new location, there's not an upfront need for a lot of cash. There's also some amenities that usually come involved with renting, and these include like having a pool or a gym or something else like that. There's also limited market risk. So if you buy into a market and then all of a sudden, suddenly that market falls, there's no risk there because you were just renting. On the cons, you're not building any equity. So you're basically paying down the mortgage of the landlord. You're also subject to rent increases. So if you sign a 1-year lease, well, the landlord could turn around and raise that rent the next year. The other risk is if the landlord decides that they want to sell the property and now they will not renew and you're forced to move again. You also can't really put too much customization into the property when you're renting. Generally, the limits will be maybe painting wall if the landlord will let you, and that's about it. There's also no tax deductions when you rent. Now, the standard deduction is a lot higher than it used to be, and so this is not as much of a factor as it used to be, but that is something to consider. There's also some limitations on pets, what they will and will not allow in the apartment or house. There's also stricter rules. They generally have rules associated when you sign a lease. They outline all the rules. And with your own house, obviously the rules are the ones that you set, or an HOA if you fall into that category. And then of course, there's always dealing with the landlord. You say that the air conditioner is broke, but it's still kind of eking along. It's generally not getting as cold as you'd like it. And the landlord says it's working fine. It's good enough. Now let's look at buying. So obviously it's going to be building equity and there's some appreciation potential. So generally houses have appreciated over time. The loan payment is fixed. That principal and interest payment, that's going to be locked in. Now your taxes and insurance are still going to be subject to inflation and other regulatory changes, but the bulk of that payment is going to be locked in when you sign that first mortgage. The other thing is that it's going to be limited at most 30 years likely, and then those principal and interest payments go away. There's also some tax benefits likely. So if you're paying for property taxes, if you're paying mortgage payments, those are all going to be tax deductible. And especially with the new OBBA bill, now it's all the way up to $40,000 for your local taxes, which could be a significant factor in some states like Texas and New Jersey. The other is freedom to customize. You can go hog wild with whatever is allowed inside of your HOA for your exterior and really whatever you want to do with the interior. Now the cons, obviously there's going to be a large down payment required. So that's a big upfront cost. And now the maintenance responsibilities are all on you. So if that air conditioner breaks, it's no longer pick up a phone and call somebody. It's pick up a phone and call somebody and then start writing checks. It's also expensive to move. So when you decide to sell the house and you move out of it, there's going to be some sale costs. So there realtor costs and closing costs and things like that. There's also the market risk. There's always a chance that you could have something like in 2008, 2009, where all of a sudden the housing market starts to fall. There's also a larger upkeep time. So just the maintenance of taking care of the lawn, taking care of the property, doing maintenance, there is a lot more upkeep time. And then the other piece is tying down your down payment. So if you put a 20% down payment on a $400,000 house, that's $80,000 that you've now tied up into your house that could otherwise be used towards investments. And then obviously foreclosure risk. If things go south, there's always a chance that you could get foreclosed upon. All right, so the key takeaways that I want you to take away from today. This is my calculator that I built on High Flight Financial. It's Excel based here. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to calculate how many months it takes to break even versus buying and renting. So if you are going to stay more than the break even months, then it makes more sense to go ahead and buy. So obviously, if you're only going to be there for a month, it makes more sense to rent than buy because of all those closing costs and everything like that.
So the break-even point, again, that's going to be the number of months that you have to stay in one spot in order for it to make sense to buy. And at this box right here, if it turns red, then that's going to be more than 15 years. I did these out to 15 years. If you'd like to see something beyond that, again, go ahead and reach out and we can get together and figure something out for you. But here I went ahead and looked at a home price of $400,000, a down payment of 20%. And what this does is it takes 20% of $400,000, and you can see here that it's at $80,000. So these cells are uneditable, but the green ones you can go ahead and edit. The next one here is a 30-year term loan, and it's going to be at a 6% interest rate. I know this is a bit unusual, but these are the ways I calculate it. The insurance is a percentage of the home price, and that will produce an annual amount there, so $1,600 a month. So if yours is a little bit higher, you can always change that percentage to say 0.45 or 0.44, whatever it does, in order to get that number on the right-hand side to equal your annual cost for insurance. Property taxes, it's the same way. A lot of times those are given as a percentage, but if you just know what it is as a sum total, then go ahead and throw that in there. And you won't be able to edit that, so you will have to edit the percentage in order to get it to match what you pay. Now, I do have a higher number in there. I do live in Texas, and so we have a little bit higher property taxes, and so that is kind of our going rate right now in the area that I live in. The HOA fees here, again, this is an annual number. Just go ahead and plug in the number of dollars that you spend annually for HOA fees. If you don't have any HOA fees, just throw a 0 in there. Maintenance costs. Okay, so again, a percentage, and then that equates to a dollar figure. In this situation, I'm assuming about $1,600 a year for maintenance costs. And then the cost to sell. So a lot of people say, well, why didn't you put 6%? Well, it never costs just 6% in order to sell. 6% is generally what you're going to pay for the realtors. You're generally going to pay both sides as a seller. That's 3% for the buyer's agent, 3% for the seller's agent. I am aware that they have changed that in recent times, but it still comes out to be that number, roughly 6%. But you're also going to have some closing costs associated when you go ahead and sell. And so that's why I've rounded it up. You can also increase it if you think that you're going to have costs associated with fixing up a property before you go ahead and sell it. Some people may want to use 10% or even 12%. And this calculator is kind of error-proof here. Let's say you go ahead and you put in 95% for the cost to sell. You will get a dated invalid number there. And I've limited it all the way up to 30%. And then you just cancel out, and it'll turn it back into a number that's in the zone. So let's look at that 8%. Again, we'll change it back. And here I assumed that an equivalent house. So you'd have to go online and see, hey, what type of houses are you interested in? How much do they cost? And how much do they cost to rent? So in this scenario, I looked at a rent of approximately $2,500. And then investment return. So this is the rate of return of what you would otherwise be investing that down payment on. So here, you're going to take that $80,000, and on the rental side, you would take that same $80,000 and invest it. And what rate of return would you get? That's what this number is here, 7%. And I have limited that number to the top end to 12%. I didn't want to give people the option to include unreasonable expectations for rates of return there. So that's what that is going to be used for. It's also going to be used for if the buy side of the equation is more expensive, like it is in this case. You'll see here it's $2,737 and the rent is only $2,500. Well, that buy minus the rent is you have an extra $237 a month if you rent. Well, we're also going to turn around and invest that to try to get more of an apples to apples comparison. And then I threw in an inflation number and realized that that inflation number here, as you can see up above, it's going to be affecting the insurance, the property taxes, the HOA, the maintenance, the rent, and the home value. So I treated them all the same. I didn't want to put in a separate inflation factor for every one of these items. So the home price and the home value may not be the same as, let's say, property taxes or insurance or things like that. But I didn't want to have all those different factors in there, so I just left one, and I have that at 2.5%. And so in this scenario, it breaks even at 75 months. So how do I do that? If you come down here, in the first month, you're going to end up paying $318.56 in principal, $1,600 in interest, $510 in taxes again, and there's your insurance at $133, the HOA, the maintenance costs, and so this is what your total monthly cost is going to be. Now, your home value is still going up because it's been a month, and so it's going up at that inflation rate. Now, the loan is going down because you're paying off that principal piece here, so your loan's going down. So the home value minus the loan, that equals your equity. But if you turned around, let's say after 1 month and immediately sold it, you'd have some significant sale costs. And so now at the end of that sale, you'd only have, let's say, $46,348. Now, your initial payment there was $80,000, so you are going to be negative there. And on the rental side, we're going to look at taking that $80,000, and after that first month, we're going to invest that $237, and this is going to inflate with that rate of return from the investments. And so now you're sitting at $80,704. So if we look at the delta between these two, it just makes perfect sense that you're going to have more money in the rent side of the house because you've only lived in the house for a month. Now, in this particular scenario, like most of the scenarios that you'll build, is this difference dollar figure will go down over time. And as you can see, the principal payment is going to go up, the interest payment is going to go down, and then all these things are going to be cycled with an annual inflation rate. And then if you go down, you can see that the first time it flips from a positive number to a negative number is right there at 75 months. And I go up here and it pulled that 75 months up so that you get a nice return of the data up at the top. So now let's look at what happens if things change. So the biggest things I want to look at is the interest rate here. If I change that interest rate, let's say I go back down to, let's say 3%. If I go down to 3%, that right now we're at 75 months. Look at that. It went from 75 months to 28 months break even. So that's kind of the big difference between what we used to have down at the 3% times versus today at 6%. And that's really the heart of that key takeaways, is that interest rates are really driving this. So if I set it back to 6%, obviously any insurance and property taxes and HOA fees, if I raise these costs, you're going to see that it's going to increase the break even. And that just makes sense. If I increase any of these costs, obviously it's going to make the buy side a little bit more expensive, and it's going to go up. And so same thing with that maintenance thing, and same thing with the cost to sell. And then if we look at like, hey, how much does it cost to rent? Well, if rent's cheap, let's say $1,700, well, now it doesn't make any sense to buy because rent's so cheap. So obviously the cheaper the rent, the more it's going to be beneficial to rent. The rate of return. So if we are investing that $80,000, then if I increase my rate of return, well, then it's going to make more sense to invest it. So the higher this rate of return, the more likely it is going to be recommending to rent. And inflation. So here's that other one I wanted to talk about, is just a few years ago, we were all the way up at 8%. So if I put in 8%, now it's going to drop that number all the way down to 16, because if inflation goes at 8%, then your house price is going to be appreciating 8%, and it's leveraged 5 times. So it's going to make sense in a very short period of time to go ahead and buy. But inflation at 8% for the full 16 months, obviously that's not necessarily all that out of whack. But if you think that it's going to be 8% for, like, let's say the next 15 years, maybe that's not a great estimate there. But we want to pick something that is reasonable. And right now we're sitting close to about 2.5%. So that's why I threw in that. But again, this is just a calculator. It doesn't include all the different variables that will be happening in your specific local market. So again, if you want to talk this over with me, go ahead and reach out to my website and you can schedule an appointment.
So the key takeaways today, I really want to emphasize every market's a little bit different. What's the same in my neck of the woods is not going to be the same as yours. This is just a general calculator. And then recent high interest rates, the 7% interest rates, that's really what's turning the tides on whether you should rent versus buy. When we were in the 3s, then almost always, if you were there for at least 3 years, it was generally more beneficial to buy. But as we see those rates creep up, you're now seeing 6, 7, 8 years and even longer before it makes sense to buy. And real estate's often considered against that inflation. If you expect inflation to peak,
Well, then maybe buying might be a better option in your case.
I didn't include PMI or VA fundings in this case. Not everybody has it, so I didn't want to include it there and confuse anybody. And then I also didn't look at selling versus becoming a landlord at the end of it. Obviously, that complicates the calculations. And if you're interested in something like that, please give me a call. I'd be happy to go over those types of situations with you. And then every situation is unique. Your situation is not the same as mine, nor anybody else's. So this, again, it's just a tool. It's not meant to be any specific recommendation, but I do welcome you to use it. The link is below in the comments on how to get to this calculator. Well, I hope you liked today's video. And if you have, go ahead and subscribe and like the video. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you very much for listening. The information provided in this video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, tax, or legal advice. I am not your financial advisor, and you should always consult with a qualified professional before making any financial decisions. All investments involve risks, including the potential for loss of principal. Past performance is not indicative of any future results. This video does not endorse any specific investment or strategy. By watching this video, you agree that I am not responsible for any financial outcomes based on the information provided.